Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Viserion PLC Interim Results Investor Presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all of the questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet company dashboard, and we will notify you by email when these are ready for your review. Before we begin, I would like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. I'd now like to hand you over to CEO Neil Ricketts. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much, Jake. Appreciate the introduction there. So we're here today to talk about the 12-month interim period, which we announced yesterday. Joined here today by Dr. Steve Hodge, who's our CTO, and Chris Lee, who's our CFO. So my background, I'm a graduate engineer, mechanical engineer, got 20 years experience in manufacturing engineering companies. And as I say, I'm joined here today by Steve. Do you want to give a quick introduction, Steve?
Just jump off mute. So yeah, hi all. Great pleasure to be here. As I've been with Viserion now for about 4 years, I'll give a bit of a talk later on about some of the activities we've recently been putting out in the press in terms of textiles. Thank you.
And the last member of the team today is Chris. Chris, can you do a bit of a quick introduction?
Sure. Good afternoon to everybody. Pleasure to be here and talk to you again. I'm Chris Lee. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. I'm a Chartered Accountant. I joined Viserion back in 2013, just after it IPO'd, and have been a CFO or Finance Director of AIM-listed companies for some 30 years.
Thank you very much. So firstly, I know we've got a lot of investors who have been invested in Viserion, but we've also got some new people on the line as well. So the first question we should ask is, what does Viserion do and what's it involved in? Well, we're a materials company and we're exploiting a number of technologies, of which the one that we're going to talk most about today is graphene. Graphene was isolated in 2004. It's been talked about since the early 1920s. And it is a miracle material that that has some unique properties. What we know is when we put it into other materials, it fundamentally alters their mechanical properties. It's a very strong material. It's a very dense material in terms of its structure. It's incredibly thin. In its purest form, it's one layer of carbon atoms thick. And so we're talking about quantum science here. It has the ability to be able to transform things like electronics and the electronics industry, as well as being extremely thermally conductive as well. So with all of those properties, we're able to use graphene in a variety of different ways to be able to improve some of the materials that we use on a day-to-day basis. So graphene itself is the first of many new materials that came about as of this discovery in the University of Manchester, as I say, in 2004. We've been involved in the graphene industry since 2014 when we bought a spin out from the University of Manchester. And then, as Steve said, he came along with an acquisition in 2017 from the University of Cambridge. So in terms of connections, we have a unique relationship between the University of Manchester, the University of Cambridge, and a number of other great universities within the UK. But adding everything together is the cement from the UK government, who have made all of this possible. The University of Manchester has about £1 billion worth of facilities up there. The National Institute, or National Graphene Institute, the Graphene Engineering Innovation Centre, the Royce facility. So they're well placed and have all of the facilities to help us exploit this brand new material. In terms of ourselves, we have over 120 patents now in this graphene space, the largest UK portfolio. And we've also recently moved into a dedicated facility in Longhope in Gloucestershire, where we've now got the largest production capacity. In order to really make that happen, we also have to have a very great team, and as well as the two individuals we have on the call today, we have a great senior management team. Diane Savory is our chair, and she's on the line listening in. Hopefully, take part in the next presentation. All of that's okay, but you also need to be able to stick to the regulation, and the regulation that controls all of this, both in the UK and in Europe, as well as other areas, is a piece of legislation called REACH. And at the moment, we're kind of accredited to produce up to 10 tons, and the plan is to get to 100 tons. There are only a handful of companies that are involved or certified to this level, and it's kind of a differentiator as well as some of the international standards that are currently being finalised. In terms of where we are, we have a global footprint now. Our main facilities are here in the UK. We have 3 factories. Longhope, as I mentioned before, which is our graphene facility. We also have a facility in Bicester, just outside Bicester, which is Total Carbide, which makes sintered hardware products. But also we have a kind of plastics polymer business in Banbury, and that's AAC Tyroma. We also have a number of laboratories in the UK as well. So as well as having or building our own facility in Longhope, we also have facilities at the University of Manchester, the University of Cambridge, and the University of Ulster over in Northern Ireland. We're the only company that has been able to pass and be certified as a graphene producer by the Graphene Council, and this is a great thing for us to be able to talk to our customers about actually being able to validate and verify the processes by which we make graphene. We have a large technology portfolio for manufacturing graphene. At the one end of the scale is the CVD single layer materials, and at the other end of the spectrum are the industrial processes that we brought in from Spain that we'll talk about later on. It's our intention to launch at least 12 products over the next year. Those have all been born through the research that's been done during the pandemic, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Chris, just like to hand over to you now to talk about our financial highlights, which is the main part of this presentation today.
Thank you very much, Neil, for that very good introduction. As I'm sure you're all aware, we released our interim results yesterday. They are for a 12-month period ended 31st of March 2022. For those of you who may not be aware, we extended our accounting reference date to the 30th of September. So these are results for 12 months out of those 18, which is why they're referred to as interim results. Our group revenues from continuing operations in that 12-month period were up 34% to 7.6 million from 5.7 million the year before. And we refer to continuing operations here because some of you, I'm sure, will recall that we closed our aluminium business in Cheltenham and moved the graphene production, which was also co-located there, to a new dedicated graphene production site in Longhope. So where we're referring to continuing operations, it's the results of the operations going forwards, which are the technology operations, principally graphene, and those of the mature businesses. Out of that revenue, the graphene revenues were up 170% to 1.9 million compared to 0.7 million the previous year. And the adjusted loss before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization for those continuing operations reduced by 45% to £1 million compared to 1.9 the previous year. Some of you may wonder why we refer to EBITDA. We use that as our primary financial indicator. That's our operating loss. And our reported loss was 5.1 million. Now, the difference between those two figures is simply some finance charges, which were 0.4 million in the period. And then we have a bunch of non-cash movements, which include depreciation and amortization, which was 1.4 million in the period, share-based payment charge, which is 1.2 million. And every reporting period, we have to revalue the Lansted instruments, the sharing agreements, and that was a loss of 1.1 million in the period. So although the total reported losses are 5.1 million, the actual sort of, in inverted commas, cash stroke operating loss for the period was £1 million. The cash at the end of the period was 3.1 million and compared to 2.4 million in the previous period. And if you could just flip on to the next slide for me, please, Neil. If we look at the total revenue increase for the year, of 1.9 million, 0.7 million of that comes from recovery in the two mature businesses, which are AAC and Total Carbide. and 1.2 million increase in revenues comes from the graphene businesses. Now, the total graphene revenues were 1.9 million in the period, of which 1.5 million related to the DSTL contract, which was announced a couple of years ago for development of specific products, and 0.4 million refers to product revenues. So, a substantial part of that was to do with the DSTL contract. If we look at what all this means in terms of cash flow and balance sheet, if you look sort of at the historic figures for the year and work out the average net monthly burn rate, it comes to about 0.4 million, and that's the operating losses or the cash used in operations, plus the amount we've spent on acquiring plant and machinery, plus the amount we spent on development costs, plus the amount we spend on paying off various leasings and rentals. So the average of that comes to 0.4 million. At the end of the period, we had cash stroke headroom on our facilities of 4.2 million. Now, 3.1 million of that was cash. 0.4 million was headroom on the invoice finance facilities, which we have traditionally used to fund our working capital requirements. And 0.6 million was the remaining amount that can be drawn under the Innovate UK loan facility. On top of that, there's a few more proceeds to come from Lansted. Listeners may recall that there were two instruments here. The first of those instruments ends this month, and the second one closes out in July, and then that will see the end of the proceeds from those particular instruments. We've expended 1.4 million in the period on scale up, and part of that is allied obviously to the move to the new factory in Longhope, where we've now spent money and created significant capacity going forwards. And for those who may not know, the Innovate UK loan of 5 million doesn't start to become repayable until 2024, so we're still a couple of years away from when that repayment starts. So this sort of period, next 2 years, is going to be very much about commercialising and monetising everything that we've developed using that Innovate UK loan money. And in terms of highlights, I'll just concentrate on one particular highlight here, which was at the beginning of the year, back in April, where we took in a strategic investment from a company in South Korea called Graphene Lab Limited. As well as getting that, we have royalty and trademark agreements in place with them. And this is a model which I think is something that we would very much look at going forwards. Finding the right partners to take us into the next stages of our commercialization, and getting the right model for that is a very good way of us funding ourselves. And I think the VKL and Graphene Lab investment was a very good example of that, and shows how we can work together with other organizations to actually move the business forwards.
Okay, back to me. So we, during this period as well, we acquired, and bear in mind that we're in the middle of a global pandemic, some assets from one of our competitors who unfortunately didn't make it through the pandemic, and we've successfully moved that factory from where it was into our facility at Longhope. It's one of the reasons why we moved that facility. That equipment now is commissioned, is set up. We're making some alterations to it. We've still got some changes to make. One of the biggest issues is an on-site kind of problem with the electricity supply, but that won't stop us. We've got plans to be able to get around that. So that capacity is starting to be kind of really kind of coming to fruition, really. In terms of other things, we've placed orders, and we've successfully now commissioned the scale-up equipment for the ink process as well. This is the process that provides us with the material for a lot of our construction and textiles opportunities. And now we're able to produce up to about 12,000 litres of ink. I was in the factory this morning looking at the machines and seeing the quality of the product that's being produced there. So we said we were going to order it, we've ordered it, we've now got it, and we've commissioned it, and it's actually up and running. That's all housed in the facility that some of you are lucky enough to have been and seen down in Longhope. Currently, we have about 18,000 square feet. There's a further 10,000 square feet as part of an innovation center and laboratory. That's now completed construction. And again, we're waiting for it to be connected onto the electricity network. We're quite a large user of electricity, and so the standard kind of warehousing supplies that are normally fitted to these facilities aren't appropriate for our use. So we work very closely with not only the landlord, but also with the various departments that are required to get that supply on place. Most of what we've been doing, although we're working on the G-Scale project and have been focused on the DSTL and G-Scale projects, the two that are coming to market quickest are Textiles, and we announced a couple of days ago our tie-up with Umbro. We've already talked about our tie-up with Superdry, and we're starting to see lots and lots of textile companies now coming to us as we move further up the supply chain. So not only supplying the graphene inks that Steve will talk about later on, but also the fabrics, and there's some great videos that Steve's got to show you that. We'll continue to bring those customers on board. It's a bit like a sausage machine now. You know, we've got a product. We now need to get to more and more people. So that means expanding our sales and marketing teams, getting a further reach. And Go to Gym is a South American company that supplies North America, and we're working with those guys to bring product to market as well. Another area that's seeing quite a lot of interest is the packaging, and we're pleased to be able to announce in the set of interims that, again, we're working with another South American-based company or a global leader in packaging around developing a specific product for them using graphene in their production. So, you know, another string to our bow. In terms of DSTL, I'm just going to ask Steve to update us on the DSTL project. Obviously, during the pandemic, it was a difficult time for all businesses. We decided to concentrate on the G-Scale and the DSTL projects. The DSTL one is slightly different in that it's a commercial contract, and that means that it's true revenue. We were asked to supply demonstrators, and Steve will tell you a little bit about how that project went. Steve?
Yep, thanks, Neil. So just to give an overview, the projects we have just finished with DSTL has been successfully completed on time and to budget. Initially, we had 2 work streams, and we were not, due to the sensitivity of the project, we were unable to disclose any information. But now we're able to open up a bit more about one of the work streams, which was focused on military bridging. And so during the projects and in both work streams, we set about and did a very wide baselining exercise exploring graphene in a number of carbon fiber reinforced polymer composites and looking at the interaction and fundamental properties and enhancements that graphene can bring to a whole host of properties. We're not allowed to talk about any of the specific data, but what was achieved in the final phase of the project has been taking our optimized graphene materials, incorporating them into a carbon fiber composite system, designing, modeling with finite element analysis, so computational modeling of a bridge under the necessary weight and loads. And then we took that to full-scale testing and actually validated the model. So everything was actually successful. And now we've reported back to DSTL, where we're now entering a exploitation phase. So how can we now take this forward and engage with other defense sector partners to commercialize and scale up the manufacture of these types of components. Thanks, Neil. I don't know if you had anything else to add on that, Neil.
No, only that you know, we've tested that to destruction. We've got a very good understanding now of how we model, as you say, using some of these new simulation techniques. Graphene is a new science, and so there isn't a black book you can go to from an engineering perspective. The most important thing is that these are very, very good demonstrators that will be both used by DSTL and ourselves in future defense shows to show our capability, not only at being able to deliver great projects, but also to be able to deliver product. And so, you know, for me, that's a really good outcome for this particular project. Okay, if we can cue up the videos, Jake.
The fabric of time is woven with incredible sporting moments. The fabric of the future will be woven with graphene.
Just a quick update there. So Steve's going to kind of walk you through what's been happening in textiles. Obviously, as we mentioned previously, we're seeing huge amounts of interest in using our technology in a wide variety of different applications, a wide variety of different sports. And Steve, do you want to just walk us through what's happening in that field?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure how well the video played, but yeah, moving on to the next slide. So we said last time in the Investor Meet presentation, we'll just focus on one particular area at a time. So in the textile sector, obviously it's a huge market. There are several issues, several problems, particularly regarding climate change that we're looking to solve using graphene or other advanced material solutions. So in particular, what we're focused on is, can we reduce fossil fuel-based polymers? Can we improve performance? Can we extend the lifetime of clothing? Can we add functionality? Can we improve the recyclability? And so graphene, as part of either a coating system or actually blended as part of a polymer yarn or filament, we can impart a range of properties that Neil talked about earlier. So enhancing thermal properties, enhancing electrical properties, adding chemical stability, reducing weights from materials if we can improve the mechanical strength. Graphene also offers UV protection properties, and in some cases we can look at technical textiles where we can incorporate antimicrobial activity that we've again discussed before and had some developments during COVID, and also fire retardant potential can be imparted depending on the design and optimization of these materials. So there's a whole plethora of potential technologies, and we're currently focused on a graphene coating system which has shown incredible improvements in the moisture and thermal transport through sportswear. So going on to the next slide, and this is very kind of a nice roadmap which has been developed by RAP, who are a climate change NGO. Textiles 2030, this is their expert-led initiative encompassing a range of experts in the UK. So looking at how we can accelerate the whole fashion and textile industry and move towards circularity. So the main targets there are focused on a 50% reduction of greenhouse gases, and also reducing the water footprint. So a lot of water goes into, if it's natural materials, actually growing crops and plants, all the way through processes such as dyeing, which can be quite wasteful. And obviously there's a lot of water effluent that comes from textile plants. So the whole set of actions that they've kind of highlighted, improving the actual fiber materials, looking at reducing the impact of production processes, lowering carbon energy throughout the supply chain, producing materials that last longer and are recyclable, and also looking at reuse and recycling of fibers, potentially reusing as textile materials or using in other applications. So our roadmap, I'll talk about later, will kind of follow in the same areas as the Textiles 2030 initiative. So recently we've put out a white paper going through all of the advancements that we've made in the textiles arena using our graphene-based ink materials. And so this technology we started developing in around 2017 through an Innovate UK project where we looked to scale up the technology. At that time was part of Cambridge Graphene Limited, and developing those in partnership with Twinery, which is a part of MAS Holdings in Sri Lanka. So that collaboration over a number of years looked at taking our graphene formulations and mixing them with different polymer systems to make something that can bind very well to different textiles. And so working hand in hand with MAS, providing samples, getting feedback from their own print trials and our own print trials, we developed a formulation that seemed to give very good improvements in mechanical, in thermal, and moisture wicking performance in the lab scale studies. So we took that forward, starting from completely dyed fabrics, where you see the picture on the left is a panel which has been coated on one side with a graphene-based formulation. The image in the middle was the second generation, where we looked to print a connected graphene circuit, a hexagonal circuit, just in selected areas. So again, going towards a more printing process, you can control the deposition of the ink in areas where you want it. So obviously you may not want graphene all over the garment. You may want to put it in selected areas where, for example, you might be sweating more, or you want to dissipate heat away from more. And that's really led into lots of trials with University of Manchester at the GEEK, our own trials and formulation work at the Cambridge Graphene Centre at the University of Cambridge. And then more recently, we've just finished on a project working with the Royal College of Art in London. And that's been working with their designers and also their textile specialists to actually take our graphene inks, play with the formulation and develop new generation inks, but also work on different styles and patterns, not just aesthetically pleasing, but functional patterns that can help us to control the direction of moisture wicking and thermal management. So yeah, that was a real good collaboration, which allowed us to also create a matrix of different types of material that we can use our graphene inks on. So now we've got around 30 different types of fabric, combinations of organic materials, synthetic polymers, and blends with things like polyester and spandex or elastane. So yeah, printing onto a fabric is not straightforward. It's a very traditional technology, but once you get to garments which have a lot of stretch and flexibility, then actually printing can be quite challenging. So we've been developing that confidence and know-how, but also not just putting graphene into a garment and then commercializing it. We're a very science-driven company. We want to understand the full benefits that graphene is bringing. So following those very promising lab tests, we've now taken those to actual wearer trials. And again, managing this during the COVID pandemic, we were quite successful, working with the University of Gloucestershire, so local to Viserion HQ. We were able to recruit a number of athletes and put them through different tests in different garments. So we were trying to compare our graphene wear coated garments with two market leading garments. So collected a whole host of data that we've published most of in our recent white paper. So we've collected information on body mass, garment mass before and after the exercise was performed, urine osmolality levels, looked at heart rate, blood samples were collected, and also internal core temperature was measured during exercise, and samples collected every 10 minutes. So after looking at the data analysis, one of the key areas where we compete well with or exceed market leading garments is in the core body temperature. So at the start and during exercise, we monitor the body temperature, and actually by the end of the exercise, the increase in temperature for graphene wear is much lower than other garments. We also compare well and perform well in moisture management, but less so in perception. And we think that's a number of factors. It can be down to the feel of the fabric, maybe the feel of the graphene pattern, which is against the skin. People have a different sensation when they're wearing one of our garments, but also, comparing against market leading brands, when people see different brands and logos, they feel like they will perform better. And so that's something that we do need to work on, and again, working with other partners and companies incorporating our graphene ware formulations into their textiles could bring great benefits. So now, again, moving out of the lab, but also gaining confidence in large-scale print trials. We've done our own trials in the UK and also supplied inks to a number of manufacturers and print houses globally. So we've got trials that have taken place recently with a company called Go to Gym in Brazil. But we are offering ready-to-print formulations. These are all water-based graphene formulations. Can be supplied and directly printed to garments. We will also be in a position to supply printed fabrics ourselves using, again, printed in the UK, or we can print these using global partners. Obviously, the textile industry is very broad and complex and highly global. And so there are many challenges that are going along with supply chains, and where we have to manufacture and send materials to can be different for every customer. But what you see here, a couple of pictures from a recent large-scale trial we did for a customer, where we're printing, and there's a video coming up shortly. Once we've optimized the print parameters, we're printing at speeds of around 18 to 20 meters per minute. We can go faster, which means we can produce a lot of these printed materials. So if you could play video 2, which just goes through. Hopefully it plays well. Great, thank you. So hopefully you have a sense now of different textiles. This particular print trial, we actually worked with 3 different fabrics with no issues, each with different combinations of nylon, polyester, and elastane. So different amounts of stretch in there as well. So yeah, we can handle pretty much everything. So again, going back to the roadmap and aligning with Textile 2030, at the moment we're quite focused on performance and durability, getting the most out of the garments that we already have. But in parallel, we are running trials where we are also, and you may have seen in previous presentations that we've done, making our own graphene polyester compounds and master batches. We'll be looking at recycled feedstocks, biomaterials. The last year has seen an explosion of everyone wants to work on sustainability and reducing CO2 footprints and reducing the amount of fossil polymers that people are buying. And now recycled feedstocks seem to be increasing in supply. I think a few years ago it was very difficult to get certain materials, but that seems to be improving. Wearables is something that, again, we've shown clips of before, where we've worked with companies developing different kinds of wearable sensor. That's something that's still relatively low TRL, but there's lots of promise to use graphene as a conductive, but also a sensor platform. We've got projects ongoing at the moment in biosensing for health and well-being. Wastewater remediation, another massive area where we think graphene could have huge potential, and particularly relevant for the textile sector. So we've seen work with graphene membrane filtration, but not just graphene, other 2-dimensional materials, due to their shape and their chemistry, are quite good candidates for filtering pollution and bacteria from wastewater. So just again, we've got a few partners listed here. Twinery, again, at MAS, a key partner for us. They're manufacturing garments for some of the world's biggest companies. Superdry and Umbro, closer to home. You know, we've several discussions and products being discussed. As you know, textiles is obviously a very seasonal industry. So, you know, plans have to be made for upcoming quarters and arranging the manufacture and distribution and yeah, whole process needs to be sorted first. Go to Jim Crossley, I think we've mentioned before, and Coat is another huge player in the industry. We're sorry, working closely to develop graphene enhanced yarns and filaments. Neil, do you want to take over there while I take a drink?
Yeah, sure. I can see you struggling there, Steve. It's interesting that you know, when we talk about a customer, you know, I've never been involved in the textile industry before this. You know, my background has been more in automotive and aerospace, but you know, the textile companies, you know, they have their launches normally 2 or 3 times a year. You know, spring and summer, autumn, winter. And then there's some, you know, some outliers there. But when they say they're going to put that into the shops, there's actually, and we can talk more generally here, you know, they'll probably be launched in the fall of the previous year, which means that actually they need to have clothing ready towards the summer of that year. So you can see how the kind of timeline plays out. So, you know, we've got to build that capacity in order to be able to supply these companies to the kind of volumes that they want far in advance of when they actually need it, which is why we pushed ahead with getting the increased capacity that we've talked about in this presentation. But just to highlight that actually, you know, being in the shops in the first part of next year is actually probably 6 months behind where the work actually happens. Okay, right. We've obviously, as part of this program, Steve talked about the white paper, which is up on our website. It's very, very important for us to be able to talk to our customers with facts and figures, and make sure that this is a scientific proposition with some real evidence behind it, rather than just a marketing play, in order to get that sustainability. And we've obviously launched our new website, which is dedicated purely to this area, and there'll be more news on that platform as it develops. A little bit just to say that pretty much everything that we're connected with has an environmental aspect to it. We've talked about concrete in the last presentation. We're seeing quite a lot of uptake from you know, big global companies around having to reduce their CO2 emissions, getting taxed, and having increased regulation around generating all of this CO2. And graphene has an important part to play there. But not only in there, it's also in the aerospace and automotive industry, where we're looking at lightweighting structures, being an enabling technology for electrification. And we've talked about the recyclability of plastics and polymers, but also the introduction of new biopolymers, and bioplastics, which are starting to become very widely talked about, if not used. And so we're in a great position to be able to help out in that area. So that's the end of our presentation as it stands at the moment. Thank you very much for listening. I'll try to answer some of the questions that we've received, either on the pre-submitted basis or that have come in during the presentation. One that came in from Gareth was about the capital expenditure over the next 12 months. Well, Chris keeps a very tight line on expenditure. I think we've got enough capital equipment as it stands at the moment. We're not anticipating huge amounts of additional capital expenditure, except where it's a requirement of a contract or ongoing work, maybe part of a much bigger research project. If we look at some of the pre-submitted questions, I'll just move them onto the other screen. Just one second. In terms of, you know, we're never going to be able to make forward-looking statements, so we can't talk about, you know, where we anticipate the share price to be in the future. That's unfortunately out of our control, especially in the current conditions where we're seeing lots and lots of volatility. There was a specific question which was asked around the Ukraine and if the Ukraine conflict was affecting the company. And my answers, which will be published onto the platform after this presentation, we're not currently being affected directly, although it is obviously having a massive impact on the volatility of the markets. A question was submitted about, our business model. Well, our business model's never really changed. It's about working with large global companies looking to develop products which are then going to be sold globally. During the pandemic, we were far more focused on the G-scale and the DSTL projects, which obviously came about as we went into the lockdowns. And that's been keeping the team very, very active, and Steve has been able to get a lot of outcomes as a result of that. We mentioned in the presentation that we're looking at introducing a number of new products. Those products will either be products that contain graphene, products that are enhanced through the use of graphene, or products that have come out of some of the research that we've done. In terms of what we see success looking like, well, that's getting these products to market and producing revenues and profitability on the back of those. So we're very focused on taking that technology that we've developed as part of these research projects, and Steve has a number of projects currently underway, as well as the G-scale and the DSTL project. They're involved in a big multi-million-pound graphene flagship project in Europe with Airbus, and so his team is always looking at new opportunities to find funding and to offset some of our development costs that way in activities where we're already going to commit to doing that work. So in terms of, we're going through a quite challenging time. This has been a very difficult period for any business, let alone a new technology business. We've seen Brexit, we've seen COVID. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, in which case we should be really strong. Now we've got issues around inflation and around supply chain costs. Those costs are passed on to our customers where we can, and we'll continue to balance our costs against the sales that we bring in our more traditional businesses. It's not quite the same problem in our research businesses. In terms of Nanomat, that's progressing well, and we would hope that we'll be able to get Roberto onto a presentation at the next meeting, and we can talk about all the good stuff that Nanomat's doing. They're obviously working with some very large customers in Europe. They're actively involved in a lot of research projects, and it's been kind of head down and getting on with work. In terms of our relationship with DSTL, yes, that contract has concluded successfully, and we're continuing to talk to DSTL about future opportunities. They're very keen to use our demonstrator, the bridge that Steve spoke about in the presentation, at a number of different exhibitions, and so the relationship with DSTL is very good, and we would look for other opportunities for us to be able to fund the business through some of that work. In terms of South Korea, again, Steve updated investors on progress in South Korea. We don't make any other products in South Korea except for the CVD. There's been some developments over there in terms of some new capacity for clean rooms and things like that. And unfortunately, South Korea has been struggling the last few months in my conversations with them around the kind of COVID Omicron type pandemic that's going on out there, which is also affecting China. There was a question later on in the pre-submitted questions about what's our relationship like with Hanwha. Well, I'm hoping to go out to South Korea at some point in the near future to be able to have a conversation with Hanwha, not only on a commercial basis but also in terms of being able to demonstrate the progress that's made through these interim statements. Steve mentioned about MASS and about what we're doing there. Well, MASS is still a key partner for us. They've also been unfortunately dramatically affected by local events there, but also through the pandemic. They're not involved in our other activities with Umbro or with Superdry, but they are part, obviously, of the global supply chain. So where Umbro get their parts eventually from, or Superdry will be a decision made by those guys. But we're still working with them, and we're still looking at opportunities that they have. There's obviously a bit of a momentum building around some of these deals. The more deals you do, the more deals you get introduced to. So that's being able to announce both Superdry and Umbro has moved along. Plus, some of our competitors have also been successful, which is great for us because it means that we can validate our proposition as well. In terms of how our revenues are growing, that will be down, unfortunately, to activities with the customers. We don't have much control over what the customers choose to do, but we obviously support them and make sure that we have enough capacity. We've talked about the largest portfolio of patents in the UK, and this is quite substantially bigger than most other companies which are on the market or who are operating in the field. In terms of the G-Scale loan, we're obviously pursuing that. We're quite a way into that project now, but all the machinery has been ordered and it's all delivered and in Longhope. Most of it is commissioned and running. There's a few bits that are still requiring a little bit of work. We're modifying some bits and pieces to suit our applications, especially around the Spanish assets. Trying to move a factory in the middle of a pandemic is never an easy thing to do. But we were able to successfully do that, get that set up, and get that installed. In fact, some of our investors may have actually seen that facility when they came to see the 3D graphene concrete printing demonstration. Quite a few questions I've received around what's happening with cementine. Well, there are two different processes currently underway. The first one is a standard called BSEN 934-2, which is around the use of admixes in concrete, and that normally takes about 3 to 6 months. We're in that process at the moment. It does depend on external testing capability and the testing houses, but the team are looking to complete that quickly. The slightly bigger challenge for us is BSEN 8500, and that process can take up to 2 years because fundamentally it's about challenging the concrete standards and getting graphene, which is a brand new technology, into that whole kind of landscape. So that's quite a challenge, but one that we're getting quite a bit of assistance from our customers on. We've talked about the Innovation Centre at Longhope. That's where I was this morning. That's now complete. We're filling that out. We're hoping to do some more investor events so you can come and see it. But it's a great facility which clearly demonstrates to our customers that we are building scale on a big kind of picture type scenario, and our customers can get comfort in the fact that we can supply them if they were to give us order coverage. In terms of the Innovation Centre, I've already said that that's structurally complete. We're just waiting for the electricity to be connected. And then that will house a laboratory plus an innovation cell for concrete and probably an innovation cell for textiles, although it's in a bit of a competition with potentially defence. So we have plenty of space as it stands at the moment. As I said before, we're not anticipating huge amounts of capex unless it's a really, really good reason. In terms of expenditure, obviously we're on the capital market, we're on AIM in order to raise cash. That cash is normally used for acquisitions, or it's used to support working cap increases and stock or capex. But we've already spoken that we've spent quite a lot of money on capex this year anyway. We're continuing to develop the workforce at Longhope. We have expanded it. We're continuing to expand our sales force as well. And we've got some new starters since the beginning of this period. And so, we're hoping that that's enough for the time being. We have the option and the flexibilities we have done this year to work shifts where there are peaks in the demand. One of those peaks was getting enough material ready in a short period of time for the foundation that we poured in the Innovation Centre. So we had to use multiple shifts at that time. There have been other times where we've also had to use the flexibility of our workforce, and I'd like to thank them. It's been a very challenging couple of years for everybody connected with the company as we've gone through this global pandemic and had lots and lots of challenges thrown at us, including relocation, but they've coped with that very, very well. Last question, which came in quite late last night after the cut-off, was about our R&D costs, and during, or actually illustrated in the 2021 annual report, for that period, 33% of our sales were spent on R&D, and the reason for that is we were paid to do that by both the STL and Innovate UK. And that was, good timing for us because it enabled to make sure that all of the workforce were kept active, and that we got some really significant outcomes in terms of these new products and opportunities that have come about. Okay, if we refer to some of the questions that have come in during the presentation, I'm just going to scroll through here. I apologise if it looks like I'm not concentrating. I am looking at the questions. There seems to be, or there was, quite a lot of unease about graphene. Steve, do you want to just kind of update us on your work with REACH and toxicology and the certification up to both 10 and 20?
Yes, I think the question is about on social media the view that graphene is harmful to humans. I think that's a complete misnomer. I think every material, every chemical is potentially harmful to humans. It's about the exposure of those materials and the dose that one receives. So graphene is a family of varying different types of number of layer, different shape, size, thickness, and so we really need to understand, and working with our other competitors as part of a REACH consortium, working to understand the toxicological properties and environmental toxicology of graphene. And so we're doing a whole host of studies. As Neil mentioned earlier, we have registration for up to 10 tons per year. So in Europe and UK and some other regions, to get to the next boundary, which will be 100 tons per year, you need to achieve and supply data on further toxicology or longer term toxicology testing. And so because graphene is a relatively young material, a lot of these studies have not passed the right amount of time, or actually labs globally have not the experience working with graphene and other nanomaterials. So often it takes a bit of toing and froing and optimizing just to get the actual sampling and data analysis correct. So yeah, these things will take time, but at the moment there's no evidence that graphene is harmful. And I think every application that we put graphene into, these sort of studies will need to be done in terms of exposure. And again, that's something we're doing with this Airbus project in the graphene flagship. We're working with another project called SafeGraph that takes our graphene and looks at the exposure at every part of the manufacturing process. So yeah, these things will be critical going forward. Neil?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions here over Textiles and about how we get paid. So we have a variety of different models depending on the customer. Sometimes what you'll have seen in both Umbro and Superdry is that we've insisted that our logos are put on the products, such as Flux, for instance. That enables us to build a kind of Gore-Tex or a Lycra type brand, and then we get paid a royalty based on using that logo. Some customers want us just to supply graphene. We kind of don't think that's the way forward. A lot of our customers want us to supply fabric, so we're becoming more involved in the application of graphene onto a variety of different fabrics. I think somewhere in the region of about 35 different fabrics now. And in that case, obviously, we supply the fabric plus a royalty. But it does really kind of depend on the customer. It would have been much easier for us to have looked at just supplying the graphene as a commodity material, but we don't think that there's a lot of there's a lot of future in that. It's very easy to get replaced, and it's we want to have a much closer relationship with our customers. So we've had to work quite hard to insist that our logos and we're recognised by the end customer. We're talking about, there's a few questions here about Enzo. Obviously, Enzo is one of our collaboration partners at the moment, looking at tyres. We're in the process of optimizing the graphene that's used in that application. We're in a testing regime. This is pretty common with all of our customers, that we have to optimize the production process where we're using graphene. So we work hand in hand with those clients. There's no real delay. It's purely that we're in that testing routine. I think, what's the Edison quote, Steve? We know how to make graphene the wrong way 100 times or something. But there's a lot of knowledge, and it acts as quite a barrier to the exploitation of graphene in terms of developing that IP about not only making the graphene, which was the first few years of our development, but then using that graphene in a variety of different applications. I think we're just about done there. We've got we're probably a couple of minutes before we're due to finish, but I just wanted to thank everybody for their continued support. We're hoping that we'll continue to do a variety of shareholder events and shareholder briefings as and when they're appropriate. We'll continue with our development of our PR channels, and we've been very successful more recently in getting quite a lot of trade publications. The guys have just come back from the Construction Week, where we had a very large stand that was provided by the organisers. And the guys have come back probably with somewhere in the region of about 450 inquiries that they need to now sort through. So it's still a relatively small team, and we're kind of under quite a lot of pressure from our clients and customers to be able to service those. So we'll continue to expand our sales and marketing teams as it's appropriate. Anything you'd like to finish with, Chris?
No, not from me. Thank you very much, Neil.
Anything, Steve?
No, very happy. Just to say again, it's a pleasure to do these presentations.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'll just hand back to Jake.
Neil, Christopher, Stephen, thank you very much indeed for your presentation this afternoon and for addressing all of those questions that were both pre-submitted as well as the ones that came through during today's meeting. And of course, we will give these questions back to you immediately after the presentation has ended for your review, and then we'll publish those responses where it's appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform. And Neil, I know you just have briefly, but perhaps for redirecting investors on the call to give you their feedback, their thoughts and their expectations, if I could please ask you for a few closing comments to wrap up with, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. As Steve said, it's a pleasure to do these presentations. We like to bring everybody up to speed where we can. We believe that we're showing significant progress in this new industry, this new industrial revolution. We're very happy to be supported by the people that we're supported with, the University of Manchester, University of Cambridge, central government, various departments within government, and look forward to talking to you soon. If you could provide any feedback after this finishes, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
That's great. Neil, Christopher, Stephen, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to update investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Viserion PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good afternoon to you all.